As I mentioned earlier, at least 4 sluice gates at the Vaal Dam have been closed. The Water and Sanitation Department saying the level has dropped. Let's get the details then from ENCA senior reporter Silindelo Masikane about the opening and the closing of the sluice gates. And there you are on top of the Vaal this morning. So give us a sense then what it's looking like and where we are at the moment regarding the sluice gates, Lee.
Well, Gareth, it does seem as though that at least 4 sluice gates have been closed. You know, last week, the Water and Sanitation Department released a statement saying that they had to open at least 12 of the sluice gates to release some of the water from the Vaal Dam due to the capacity. And where Tamsanga and I are right now is one of the dams that's downstream from the Vaal Dam. We are at Barrage in the Vaal, one of the most affected areas in terms of the flooding that's taken place due to these sluice gates being opened. In fact, at this particular dam, you can see that the river banks have been broken. You can see, in fact, that the water is still quite at very high levels. However, from the last time I was here, Gareth, the water has subsided somewhat, but you can see that the homes along the river banks, if they're not completely submerged, then they are still submerged with some water in them. In fact, we've seen a number of the residents coming out to see what exactly is happening here, and I'm actually joined by one of the residents of the Vaal, who I understand has never seen this in your time living here in the Vaal. Perhaps maybe tell me exactly what you understand to have transpired in terms of one of these sluice gates, which I understand is here by Barrage, being opened a little bit too late.
Nobody of us are perfectly sure exactly what happened, but I've been staying on the main part of the Vaal River for quite a number of years. And what I think did happen is some of the sluice gates here were opened a bit too late. The coordination regarding the barrage and the Vaal Dam sluice gates, that specifically wasn't coordinated perfectly, because there's a lot of people that had damage here in the loch just before the barrage, and even our guys on the main river. The water went over the banks and actually came up quite high. I haven't seen it like that ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it actually came up to the 100-year flood mark and went over that a bit, yeah. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time this morning.
No problem, thank you.
All right, Gareth, I just wanted to take a listen then to the Water and Sanitation Department's DDG with regards to the number of gates that still remain open with regards to the Vaal Dam.
Some time before we can actually accurately state that when we will go back to normal operations, where we will be doing discharges out of the valves and not through the gates. But because the dam is at 111%, and we're also watching that Freddie will have on the catchment of the Vaal. It has made landfall, and we will be awaiting that as well to see what is how we should accommodate further possible flooding that could come in. But as it is from a normal water resource management perspective, you always want to start your dry season with a full dam. So we would not want to unnecessarily lower the dam to such levels where we might go into, finding ourselves in a critical position going into the.
So, Slee, we heard there about a reference to Cyclone Freddie. I know you mentioned this when we started talking as well. Just, by the way, I've seen a very well-known game reserve, Sabi Sands Game Reserve, have put out a post on Instagram, and you can just see how wet it is, how windy it is. They're saying that Cyclone Freddie has arrived there. So it's very much a concern now as well. And let's talk about the residents for a second living along the riverbanks. You referenced them earlier, but what exactly are authorities warning them to do? Because you have to ask the question, where are they going to go?
We've spoken to a number of organizations who've been assisting those that needed to be evacuated along the riverbanks here in this particular area. We understand at least 40 families have had to be evacuated. We also understand from the Human Settlements MEC Lebogang Maile during a press briefing earlier this week that at least 2 families had refused to be evacuated. But from what we understand from speaking to local authorities as well is that there is some rain that is expected this week, so there is some anxiety around whether we're going to see even more families being displaced in this particular area. But of course, the Water and Sanitation Department once more warning residents that whoever is living along the riverbanks needs to evacuate or they need to at least remain cautious and monitor the situation quite closely. Let's take a listen.
Vaal Dam has recovered to 111%. This is a significant downflow from where it was in terms of the 120% where it turned, and also increase in inflow into the dam has decreased where it peaked once at 3,800. It is now restored to a level of 547 cubic meters per second, which allowed us also now to amend the discharge, the outflow downwards to the effect that as from 10 o'clock this morning, we will have another gate closed at the Vaal Dam, which will actually then bring it down to 7 gates being opened for discharge still to continue. Now, yes, we will be able to actually then measure accurately in terms of what that outflow would be. We are maintaining discharge higher than the inflow to bring the dam lower, as I previously stated that it's at 111%. Similar at Bloemhof. At Bloemhof, we have peaked at 3,800 cubic meters per second in discharge. At this point in time, we are reducing the outflow at Bloemhof. Another amendment this morning, 1,000 that it was yesterday, to 2,800 cubic meters per second. So there will be less flow in the river, much less flow than what we experienced during the peak. High flow conditions and the warning and caution still exist, and still goes out to the people downstream that there's still a higher flow than normal, even though there is a decrease in the levels that will be detected.
Yeah, incredibly worrying for those residents. You can see the houses just over the right-hand shoulder of senior reporter Silindelo Masikane on one of the bridges above the Vaal for us, keeping a close eye on that. There it is there. Thanks, Slee. As she pops out the way there, you'll be able to see. We may be able to zoom in. I think our camera team will be able to zoom in for us. That's exactly what Slee was talking about as I say goodbye to her. That is the damage and the threat to the damage of property in the Vaal. Slee, thank you very much to you and your team. We'll come back to you again a little bit later.